It's time to make the desk. I wanted it to be a floating table, and although it held itself in place, I ended up adding one leg because it didn't seem very secure when being pressed down. The idea was to hang it from the wall like a floating shelf and attaching it with steel tubing from the shelf boxes. To build the top, I used a door that I got for less than 30 euros on a home supply store. I thought that for this purpose, the best option would be to make a torsion box table so it could be stable and lightweight. And when the idea of using an actual door as a core for the build and search for prices, I decided to buy the door instead of making lots of strips and lots of glue-ups. This is not a heavy working table, so it doesn't need to be rock solid. But in the end, it turned out quite heavy and solid, which is cool, I guess. To fill the holes inside the door, I used some polyurethane expanding foam and made sure to protect myself from it because the last time I used this, I destroyed my favorite black pants. Put on some gloves made for ogre hands and put some eye protection just in case. Well, of course, when you use protection, nothing bad happens. The space between the shelf and the vertical leg is a bit under 2 meters, so I had to cut the door a little bit, also calculating for the Valchromat covering that you will see later. These OSB strips will work as a clit on the wall where the desk will fit in, creating a floating look. I glued and nailed them together as one single block. I found a scrap of 6mm MDF that will be perfect to address one of the long edges of the door because I want to make the final width align with the shelf vertical divider. So I just cut some strips out of it and also some Valchromat ones since the width of the strips were the same. Clean up one edge and stick them in place. The edges were protruding just a tiny bit, and I took my time sharpening the block plane with my cheap Japanese waterstone. The D-track clamps from Rockler are just great to hold the wood in place. It just feels so good not having to secure the table or the wood while pushing the plane like it stupidly always happened to me before. I wanted the desk to be fully covered on Valchromat material so it gives continuity to the shelf. It wasn't very easy to glue such a huge board, and I should have planned it better beforehand. And it would be easier if I had a big table to work instead of the floor. Still, I imagined a way to get everything reasonably pressed down and pin-nail the edges to keep them pressed while the glue dried. On the next day, I trimmed the edges and glued the board that I selected to be the top side. This time I used the working table, though it was too small, but worked fine with some wood bars helping out smashing the surfaces. Next step is to flush trim the excess material all around except the back part, of course. I was worried about losing control with the routers, so I cut the back corners by hand. I'm using the mixing mate from Rockler that really surprised me how cool it is. I find it really handy and very convenient. Totally eliminates any mess using paint or varnish cans. I sprayed 4 coats of polyacrylic matte varnish. To keep the top straight over time, I got steel tubing that will be attached to the bottom of the table coming from one of the shelf boxes. I drilled a bunch of holes to apply some bolts to the shelf and a lot more to screw it up to the underside of the desk. My drill press has very short traveling, so I needed to insert the drill inside a hole and finish it up. I gave it a few clear coats of lacquer just to prevent rust in the future, and it was finally time to start the assembly. First of all, I added a block to prevent sagging on the area where the steel is going to fit. Then made some holes for the bolts and added spacers to compensate the thickness of the table, which is bigger than the shelf. In the end, it didn't turn out to be perfect, but I fixed it. My dad helped out with the assembly, and it wasn't too bad. We tried to remove the stool to see what happened, and it actually held itself just fine. The pencil would not roll over, but still it was a bit scary to leave it that way, because anyone could just accidentally sit on the table, or even me making pressure on the desk while working, so I will make a lag and end up that problem. But first, I need to get more comfortable working, and Rockler was kind enough to send me one of their super cool T-track tables. But let's say I'm too short to work comfortably around it. Let's just grind these sexy legs and bring them down to the next level of square holes. Yeah, so much better. It feels perfect now, and the T-track accessories have an amazingly unexpected hold-on pressure. Well, let's go back to the project. I used the scrap from the door to make the core of the leg since I could get a solid piece of wood out of it. Just repeated the process of coverage to make it gray. Cut the core leg to size and identified all the pieces to know which one goes where. Cut the right piece to the same size as the wood core and mark the total height of the leg to cut the other 3 pieces. Still need to remove material from the left piece so it gets flush with the edge of the tabletop. Here I used the D-track hold-down clamps to securely clean up the cut. This seems to go well together, so it's time to glue it all up. Then I took a few passes over the table saw just to make the faces perfectly flat for the next glue up. Hand screw clamps are very useful to secure pieces when you need to work on the face that stands up. I am using 2 bolts of these to attach the leg from behind to the steel tubing, so I made holes with a smaller diameter all the way to the inside of the tubing and countersunk. I then brought the leg out to apply finish and use Rockler mini finishing points to speed up the process and be able to rotate the piece even before the finish was fully dry and make good coverage of all faces really quickly. While that was drying, I took my time and really carefully and slowly tapped the threads on the steel using the driller because I couldn't rotate the hand tapering tool in such a small space. I miscalculated the thickness of the spacers when installing the steel tubing to the shelf, and now I need to fill this gap with some scrap thin strips that seem to be just right for this purpose. Screw the steel to the tabletop and it was done. I'm very happy with the way it turned out, though this isn't exactly the floating table that I wanted first. I could have made the leg differently or even hold that corner with some steel cable on the wool structure to the platform and keep it legless, but this seemed to be the best minimal option without needing to unmount the table from the wall and shelf and rework the metal support. I am now working out some lighting panels to create a mini photography and video studio in that side of the table, and I think I will share with you guys my thoughts and process on a future video. I would like to say thank you to Rockler for sponsoring this video and making it possible, and thanks everyone for keeping around during this journey. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you later. Oh, by the way, Savvas Papasavva is an artist that has 2 great YouTube channels, and he gave me this really cool mouse pad with the Swan push stick print, which I love. And for those who have been interested in my table saw push stick, well, the design and concept are actually his. You can go over to his website and get the design to make your own. Thank you, Savvas. Love your work and channels.